Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Paul.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. In the last few weeks, you have received a fair amount of criticism and suggestions about what to do with interest rates and the economy. And I think that's going to continue because I suspect that we are moving into what you call, you do not call a recession, but a retrenchment. I guess that may be a new word. But anyway, there will be a lot of suggestions, and I do not want to presume that I want to make a suggestion of what interest rates should be, but I would like to address more the system that you have been asked to manage. Because in many ways, I think it's an unmanageable system, and yet it's key to what's happening in our economy. We have a system that you operate where you are asked to lower interest rates. And I would like to remind my colleagues and everybody else that when you're asked to lower interest rates, you're asked really to expand the money supply because you have to go out and buy something, and you buy debt. So every time somebody says lower the interest rates, they'll say inflate the money. And I think that's important. You had a little conversation before about the money supply, conceded it was important, but you don't even know what the good proxy is, so it's very difficult to talk about the money supply. I'm disappointed that we don't concentrate on that, talk about it more, even to the point now that you no longer make projections. I think this is an admission almost of defeat. There's no requirement for you to say, well, we're going to expand the money supply at a precise rate. So we're past that point of a tradition that has existed for a long time. But I think it's an unmanageable system, and it leads to bad ideas and bad consequences because we concentrate on prices, which is just a consequence of the inflation of the money supply. And therefore, if a PPI is satisfactory, we neglect the fact that the money supply is surging and that it's doing a lot of mischief. And therefore, we talk about, well, maybe if we just slow up the economy. If we slow up the economy, it's going to take care of the inflation. I think we're really missing the point. But you did mention a couple words in your testimony today that I thought were important, acknowledging that there are problems in the economy that we have to address. You talked about excesses and imbalances and the need for retrenchment. And I believe what is important is that we connect the excesses and the imbalances to the policy that you operate, because I think it is key. And instead of saying and being reassured that the PPI is okay, if we'd have looked at the excesses, maybe there would have been an indication that there was a problem in the over-speculation in the stock market. But here we have a monetary system that creates a speculation where a NASDAQ goes to 5,000, and then we have a lot of analysts telling us it's a good buy, and yet you're now citing the analysts to say, well, we can be reassured because these analysts are saying, you know, there's going to be a lot of growth. So I'm not sure which analysts you're quoting, but I'm not sure that would be all that reassuring. But I think we should really talk about the money supply and what we're doing. In 1996, you expressed a concern about irrational exuberance in the stock market, and I think that was very justified. But since that time, the money supply, measured by M3, went up $2.25 trillion, and the stock market, of course, has soared. And I see those imbalances as a consequence of excessive credit. And this system has defects in it. You're expected to know what the proper interest rate is. I don't think you can know it, or the Federal Reserve. I think only the market can dictate the proper interest rate. I don't think you know what the proper money supply is. You admit, you know, you don't have a good proxy. And yet that is the job. And yet all we ever hear are the people coming and say, now, Mr. Greenspan, if you want to avert a downturn, if you want to save us, just print more money. And that's essentially what this system is doing. Now, the one question I have quickly is your plan that you mentioned in the Senate about using other securities like state bonds and others in order for you to buy more things. I think it's ironic that with a $5.7 trillion national debt, we're running out of things to buy.
Well, just remember that of that $5.7 trillion, a very large part is held in trust funds of the United States government, so that the net debt is really $3.5 trillion, of which the Federal Reserve owns more than 500 billion.
Could it be an advantage to making some of that marketable rather than going out and buying municipal bonds or foreign debt or state bonds?
No, because I don't want to get into the counting processes here, but if you're dealing with a unified budget accounting system, all of that debt is intra-governmental transfers and essentially is a wash. You have to have external securities to affect the economy. What we were discussing in the remarks with respect to what the Federal Reserve is looking at is what type of securities we could use for so-called repurchase agreements which are collateralized. In other words, when we engage in an open market operation through a repurchase agreement, what we have now is federal government securities as collateral. And the question is, if we don't have them, what other types of collateral would we use? And we were therefore talking about, for example, state and local securities. But the crucial issue there is that to the extent that we use securities which are more risky than federal governments, we basically just take more collateral to offset that. So we can maintain the same degree of risk. And what we are trying to evaluate is various different types of securities which we can employ solely for the purpose of protecting the transaction from default.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hinosa.